What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a little preview of sorts for Doom the Dark Ages Revelation DLC, which is launching on July 7th, and obviously this video is going up a little bit before that, which bears an explanation. So, roughly a week or so ago, I was invited to attend a digital hands-off presentation of this DLC, where Hugo Martin and Marty Stratton both answered some questions at the end, which is how I'm bringing you all of this information. But that, of course, means that I did not play it for myself, and the footage that you are seeing is not mine. In fact, it is B-roll that was provided. Nonetheless, I am able to pass on a fair bit of information, as will a handful of other people, I'm sure, at least today. But when this DLC releases, I will be reviewing it, but one step at a time. So, Doom the Dark Ages Revelations is the big DLC for, of course, Dark Ages. However, it's probably worth a mention that this is roughly the size of the two DLC for Eternal combined. All told, the campaign for it should be like roughly 10 to 12 hours, but after you do that, you're going to unlock a whole bunch of progression and mechanics tailored to providing what is basically an end game. So you could very much play after that, and there's more than likely going to be more content if you're into that than the initial 10 to 12 hours. They did also mention that they did try to tune the baseline of this DLC to be a little harder than the base game. However, with that in mind, the difficulty options, which are fully customizable and modular, are still there and you can still mess around with them. So obviously mileage is going to vary a little bit even on that front. That said, what is this DLC actually about? Well, at its core, the DLC is about the fall and ascension of the Doomslayer. Trapped in a purgatory of your own mind, the only way out is to, of course, rip and tear through demons, and that is naturally where the new weaponry is going to come into play. Much of this DLC and its progression has been built around the new Chain Spear, which you are going to be using in place of the Shield Saw. Now, this comes with a whole bunch of new ways to approach and get around levels and things, as the spear is going to be able to be thrown, used as a grapple, or even an anchor point for you to get up into the air and move around as you shoot things down below, and just generally get a little more airborne while still trying to keep a hold of Doom the Dark Ages more of tank feel. Along the way, you are going to be picking up progression for that spear, so it won't be fully usable the second you pick it up, but rather, over the course of the DLC, you will unlock abilities, making it more useful as you go. As you are using it in place of the Shield Saw, it does seem to do the core functions of that thing as well, in terms of breaking through the superheated metal armor stuff, in addition to the things it will normally do, of course. Unsurprisingly, though, this new mobility granted by the spear is going to dig into the level design a lot, and as such, a lot of the levels are going to be a little more vertical as you would expect. You're going to be able to get into the air, which gives you just other options of getting around different enemies, and then on top of all that, they're naturally going to compensate by adding some new enemies, of course. Well, new and returning, I should say. We're going to see things like the Archvile, the Pain Elemental, and the Wizard. What I thought was especially interesting, though, is that they also mentioned that there are going to be different variants of some of these enemies that will behave differently in certain situations. So even on top of the new enemies they are adding, there will be some variations therein with different behaviors and the like, which is something you'll have to watch out for as you advance. Now, what I thought was especially interesting here, though, as I mentioned already, is that they are going to be adding what is effectively a bit of in-game to this DLC. So my understanding is that the gist of it is there is going to be a hub level that you will access then 3 other levels from, and as you go, you'll be able to unlock some of that progression and just solve more puzzles and explore more of the area that you find yourself in, which is going to have some natural progression to it in and of itself. Following that and, completing the story of the DLC, there's going to be other stuff you can find alongside that, however, in the form of various trials, including things around the Praetor suit, and then classic levels. I believe that was in the trailer already, so I don't think that was a spoiler, but the classic levels are going to be featured as a sort of playable segment of Doom's history. And there will even be an uber boss of sorts that all of that will ultimately lead to. And even then, once that's finished up, there's going to be more challenges and unlocks via things like the Ripatorium. If you're unfamiliar with that, the quick explanation is that it is more or less an endless arena mode, but there's all sorts of different stuff you can do with it to customize how that functions, and the Ripatorium is getting some stuff from this DLC, of course, which is going to offer people more ways to simply rip and tear their way through the enemies they've unlocked via via the DLC. On top of all that, while I am not a big music guy personally when it comes to games, I know they are having Finishing Move return to do a lot of the soundtrack. That is who did it for the base game as well, I believe. And that's a list of, I would say very quickly, the most important stuff to know as we move into this thing. Now, from there, however, I do want to offer a few more thoughts on it. Namely that, I guess the main thing I'm curious about is just how much the movement from the chain spear is going to make things feel different here. The base game, Doom the Dark Ages, was very grounded in comparison to something like Eternal, I know. I'm not wildly familiar with Eternal, to be fair, but Dark Ages was all kind of like upfront and personal, using their melee system to bash enemies and get resources out of that. And while there certainly was a lot of movement, naturally, it was all more or less ground level, and you're not really in the air so much. Whereas with this chain spear, you're going to literally be in the air for quite a bit of it, using it to grapple and move around levels, and of course fly circles, I guess you could say, around various enemies, which gives you different avenues of approach. And while they certainly have experience with that kind of thing, I'm just very interested to see how it feels to actually play that, because again, this was hands-off, so I'm not sure myself, given the way the base game worked. Another thing I'm very interested in is the secrets and kind of moving around the hub sort of area that you'll be connected to. As they specifically mentioned, some of their QA people were having trouble finding some of the secrets, which leads me to believe that some of that stuff will actually be fun to explore and see what you can find and discover, and then of course how that relates to the progression. But the nice thing about these Doom games is that there's always a good reason to do some of that exploration, mainly for things like the lore and finer details about this area we find ourselves in, which are going to be interesting to me at the very least. And if that wasn't enough, I'm also curious to see how the game plays in terms of difficulty, because again, the base game had that modular difficulty that you could very easily tune and adjust things to be exactly how you want, and I'm actually pretty curious to see how much that interacts with some of these in-game challenges and things that they are bringing in with this DLC. Like, for instance, one of the things you could do with the base game was turn all of the speed for the projectiles to super slow, but make them deal absurd amounts of damage when they hit you, if they hit you, that kind of thing. And I just kind of want to know if that is still present in this DLC, or if that's something they kept in mind as they moved through it. Because while obviously the people who are exceptional at these kinds of games are almost certainly going to run through that top-tier content, I myself am just curious about the balancing, you could say, that goes into something like an in-game challenge for a game with difficulty settings like that. Like, clearly these things are meant to be super challenging and push people to, of course, master the systems and the like. And while it's probably not super interesting to a lot of people, I am just really curious about how that was tackled from like a game design perspective and what their approach to that on this DLC was. But obviously time will tell, and we'll probably have our answer to that on July 7th, I would imagine, when this releases for, I believe it's $20 for the DLC. But as for today, I do think that is pretty much going to do it. I certainly hope you enjoyed the video. If you're looking forward to this DLC, or you just want to mention something about it, I guess by all means drop it down in the comment section below, which naturally means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.